Is globalization a single, unified project? It seems clear that hyper-globalisation has slowed, so are we living through an historical turning point? Why is there a political backlash against globalization? Are powers, institutions, and geopolitics the main drivers of globalization rather than, say, economics? Can a system that produces inequality, political backlash, cyber and technology risks, and geopolitical rivalry continue to function? In this video, I will dig into this and also how globalization has affected the individual, our perceptions of time and distance, and our knowledge of parts of the world we may never visit. I have a normative concern with legitimacy and social cohesion when it comes to globalization, which I will explain. There's also a moral layer here. The system is judged partly on whether it maintains political stability, fairness, and social cohesion. Whilst I see international trade as the underlying principle of globalization, it appears to me to have the properties of something that evolved gradually, but was then manipulated to conform to a political agenda. I don't believe that the forces of a doctrine that has hitched other tenets to its wagon, flattening of cultures, global governance, national democratic deficit, and loss of domestic jobs, as something that we shouldn't be challenging. We see this pushback most markedly in the America First agenda that is seeking to upend the liberal world order, which is largely synonymous with globalization. So the compression or the annihilation of distance and space is an important underlying characteristic of globalization. Towards the end of the 20th century, social theorists coalesced around some key concepts relating to the study of globalization, namely deterritorialization, interconnectedness, speed of social activity, that it is a long-term process, and with globalization being a multi-pronged process. Try doing a game of charades with those terms. Now, deterritorialization has had huge effect for me in my career as a software engineer. In a startup I worked at recently, there were only a dozen or so software engineers, but not a single one was office-based. People worked in their homes in the Far East, in northern Spain and Kazakhstan, annihilating distance between colleagues who were UK-based. Everyone worked on the same source code and were able to talk instantly on messaging systems. The furthest any person could be reached was no more than half a second away in terms of internet links between continents. This is a big change in the social space for work colleagues since the 1980s, when telephone links were expensive and people were generally located in the same physical workspace. Whilst there is some overlap with interconnectedness and its relationship to deterritorialization, it does change the nature of human affairs. It would not be possible to have so many people around the world investing in Bitcoin and crypto without the instant exchange of market news, price updates, and the computing networks that record and broadcast on digital ledgers the transactions between the agreeing computer nodes when participants from anywhere in the world exchange their digital currency. This is merely one example of how optical fiber networks are the most fundamental part of the transport layer that enables this interconnectedness. Similarly, this interconnectedness gives people in developing nations and rural areas access to education and learning that could not have been possible. All that is needed is an internet connection and a mobile or computing device. Similarly, banking across Africa through mobile phone digital wallets has made it easier for unbanked people to receive international remittances from family abroad or placing and receiving cross-border payments. This does not, however, make it wholly without controversy. Terror networks, money launderers, and other criminal activity, as well as the spread of disinformation and propaganda by nefarious political operators, are sped up by orders of magnitude, with interconnectedness operating at the speed of light. The speed of social activity emphasizes the rapid flows of information, goods, capital, and people. For example, as a knowledge worker, I can get data in real time from almost anywhere that I can get a subscription to. For example, from this laptop, I can, within less than 100 milliseconds, be getting streaming live stock prices from the New York Stock Exchange and buy or sell stocks without any real disadvantage compared to a person who lives and works in New York City, whilst having all the foreign exchange between the US dollar denominated stocks and my UK pounds dealt with automatically per transaction. In spite of the rapid rise of globalization, scholars see it as having an arc and being a long-term process that has many historical features and developments. We can go back to Alexander the Great expanding his empire, and as he paid his soldiers in gold from the mines that he seized, as well as finding better ways to organize international trade. Sociologist Anthony Giddens describes globalization ultimately as a function of modernity. He states, the globalization of social activity, which modernity has served to bring about, is in some ways a process of the development of genuinely worldwide ties. Citizens in Western countries are more likely to be directly impacted by globalization in their lives, regardless of the work activities they partake in, affecting the self-identity of individuals. Again, commingling globalization with modernity, Giddens continues. We should grasp the global spread of modernity in terms of an ongoing relation between distanciation and the chronic mutability of local circumstances and local engagement. Giddens articulates this as the dialectic of the local and the global. This refers to the logical argumentation used in the analysis of observable social and economic processes, Hegel and Marx being the proponents of this dialectic logic. Indeed, this has been the root of much debate and friction in modern society when economic, social, and cultural relationships have significantly shifted to the extent that people are no longer shielded from global forces, even the spread of news from places they have no ethnic connection with, but their smartphone is bombarding them with whatever angle a news proprietor seeks to gain revenue with. Fear sells, after all. Is this long-term process now peaking with, as I mentioned, the likes of America First? So to wrap this up, I see globalization as a project that could only have become what it is with a lot of political will and planning. However, globalization is not delivering on political stability, fairness, and social cohesion. In fact, you could say these are precisely the things we are lacking currently, especially when it comes to equality of opportunity. This all manifests itself in matters such as Brexit, where 17 million people said no thanks and delivered that message to the establishment in London and Brussels to say people have sucked up enough technocratic rule, regulatory drag, trade deficits, and treaties they were not consulted on. Politicians today are waking up to the fact that low-growth economies in the West are not going to improve GDP per capita by offshoring all the blue-collar jobs. Thus, a return to a domestic focus that reverts to governing in the national interest will increasingly become the battle for the hearts and minds of voters.